You're listening to an audio edition of Upon Further Examination at kielharvey.substack.com. This is Men Are One Crisis Away from Finding Out. Men's Friendship at 40 and Why the Church is Pretty Good at Fixing It. Written and read by Kiel Harvey. I didn't love going to church in my 20s and 30s. It wasn't a crisis of faith. It was a crisis of bandwidth. From about 25 to 35, I was heads down in my career, and my kids were young, which means they needed everything all the time. Sunday morning was one more obligation in a week that was already full of them. I went, mostly, but if you'd asked me what church was adding to my life in that season, I would have struggled to give you a good answer. I'm older now. The sheen of climbing the corporate ladder has faded a bit. Not because ambition is bad, but because I've gotten enough of what the ladder promises to know what it doesn't deliver. What I've started to appreciate instead are slower, simpler things. Hanging out with friends, watching my kids grow into adults, having a reason to pause and reflect instead of optimizing every hour. And somewhere in that shift, I noticed something about men in my life. There's a specific kind of loneliness that hits men in midlife, and the numbers on it are grim. In 1990, 3% of American men said they had no close friends. By 2021, it was 15%, a five-fold jump. And the share of men with 6 or more close friends fell from 55% to 27%. The friendships of your 20s run on proximity. Roommates, teammates, the guys you grabbed lunch with at your first job. Then careers and kids arrive. Proximity disappears, and most men never replace that infrastructure. I'm 40 now, and I can tell you what most of us have at this age. Colleagues, neighbors, and a group text that's mostly memes. Although I do really appreciate the memes. What we don't have is a guy you can call at 9 p.m. when something is actually wrong. I learned the difference the hard way when my daughter Raylan died. And I want to be careful here because the people I work with were genuinely good to me. Some of them went far beyond anything a job requires, and I will never forget it. Nothing in this piece is a knock on them. But here's the thing I noticed, and it's not a criticism of anyone. Work support, even at its very best, shows up for a moment. It comes to the memorial, sends flowers, covers your projects, and tells you to take all the time you need. Then work needs you to do your job. What it can't do, structurally, is be there for the long, unglamorous middle of grief. The weeks after everyone goes home, when the casseroles stop and the trash still has to go to the curb, and you can't think straight enough to do it. That's where the guys I volunteer with at church were. They lived in the thick of it with me. They showed up at my house. They brought meals long after the funeral. They helped me with chores I didn't have the capacity to think about. Nobody organized it with a sign-up sheet. They just kept coming. Because they were already in my week. Every week. And they didn't stop. The difference wasn't kindness. Both groups had plenty. The difference was proximity. Work can come to the memorial. The church guys were still there in week 6. That contrast taught me more about friendship than anything else in my 20s did. Here's the practical observation, and I think it explains why church works for this, even when nothing about it is advertised as a friendship program. Most men don't build friendships face to face. We build them shoulder to shoulder. Sitting across a table from another guy and sharing is something most of us will dodge forever. But put us next to each other with a task, a truck to load, chairs to stack, a ministry to run, and friendship happens almost as a byproduct. We talk while our hands are busy. The trust comes from the reps, not the conversation. Now look at what church actually asks of you, structurally. It puts the same group of men in the same place every week for years. It hands them shared work to do. It gives them a reason to know each other's families. And it normalizes asking about the parts of life that work conversations carefully avoid. Nobody markets any of that as a male loneliness intervention, but I've stopped thinking of it as an accident. Community isn't a side effect of church. It's half the design. The one another instructions are in the original spec. What's remarkable is that a design this old happens to rebuild, almost piece for piece, exactly the infrastructure men lose after 35. Proximity, repetition, shared purpose. The 3 ingredients of male friendship on a weekly schedule with free coffee and sometimes some donuts. I'd be lying if I said attendance alone does it. I've sat through plenty of services in my 30s and made approximately 0 friends doing it. You can be in a room with 200 people every Sunday and remain completely unknown. And I'll own my part in that. The unknownness wasn't the room's fault. It was mine. I showed up, sang, listened, and then I left. And I never let anyone in. I never let anyone truly know me. Coffee with someone new from church felt riskier than meeting a new prospect at work because a prospect only evaluates the pitch. A guy from church might actually get to know me and not like what he finds. Rejection at work costs you a deal. Rejection at church costs you something closer to the bone. So I kept everyone at handshake distance and called it busyness. My pastor named the thing I was actually missing, you don't have to know everyone, but you have to be known by someone. I knew plenty of people at church. Nobody knew me. The shift for me wasn't going to church. It was volunteering at church. The friendships came from the serving team, not the sanctuary. That tracks with everything else I've said. The row of chairs is face-to-face at the stage, but the volunteer team is shoulder to shoulder with each other. It also quietly solved the being known problem. Serving next to a guy every week lets him get to know you in small doses. Hands busy, no interview. If you're a guy reading this and the loneliness thing stings a little, my pragmatic advice isn't go to church more. It's find the thing where men do work together and join it. At a church, that's usually one sign-up form away. So here's the knot and the answer to the title. A crisis in your life is an audit. It doesn't change the state of your friendships. It reveals it. All at once, with no margin for spin. In one terrible week, you find out exactly who knows you, who can carry you, and whether the support around your life runs deeper than kindness. And you can't build the answer in the moment you need it. By the time the crisis arrives, the answer is already set. It was set years earlier, in 100 unremarkable weeks, by whether you ever let anyone in. I found out I had guys. Not because I saw any of this coming, but because a few years before, I had joined a serving team and gotten known almost in spite of myself. If the audit had run in my 30s, when I knew everyone and no one knew me, it would have returned a very difficult result. I spent a decade treating church like an obligation to schedule around. I'm not saying this season was wrong. Careers and small kids are real. And I'm not interested in guilting anyone who's in that season right now. I'm saying that on the other side of it, the thing I undervalued most turned out to be the thing I needed the most. Not the production, not the programs, not the sermons, the guys. They showed up. That's the whole thing. Somebody has to show up. Make sure before your one crisis arrives that somebody can. That was Men Are One Crisis Away from Finding Out. New essays every week at kielharvey.substack.com. If you want more, check out my Bible study workbook, From the Source. It's available at kielharveybooks.com and at amazon.com. Also, if you want to dig more into your Bible in community with these new friends you've made at church, check out RockReader.com. It's a Bible journaling app I built. It's free across all platforms. It's not available on the Apple App Store yet, but it is coming. It is currently available on Google Play, and you can also use it online at rockreader.com. Thanks for listening.